My boss is right there, so thanks for the title. Appreciate it. It's great to be here. This is a wonderful day. I'm so proud to be a part of this with Sportico and Variety. Every year we love doing this event. And this is a topic of conversation that I am incredibly passionate about in my work with athletes on a day-to-day basis, talking about the off the field, off the court, off the mat success. And we're going to dive in. We've got a great group of esteemed panelists today. So going to get right to it, and I'm going to throw it all the way across this huge stage to Caitlin. And on our prep call, we talked a lot about the idea of being more than an athlete, and when you have that realization of, I am more than just a basketball player, more than just a gymnast. When did you have that realization, and how did you activate on expanding that identity and who you were off the mat?
I got blessed in a sense. When I was 16, I had an injury that took me out for 2 years. And it was the first time that I realized that I'm not a gymnast and that it will not be my life path forever. And so I had to think of it then when I thought, I was going to go to the Olympics and I thought I was going to do all these big things. But that was like the first eye-opening moment. And to be in a sport like gymnastics, you don't have a lot to look forward to after college, unless you're a pro like Jordan, who's going back to the Olympics. But so I didn't really have that ability. And so during college, I kind of had to focus on the things that brought me joy, which was poetry and writing. And I realized that my coach always told us, like, you guys aren't gymnasts, you do gymnastics because you're good at it and it's something that you love and you have the ability to do. And after the 4 years were up, as much as I thought about like, this is what I'm gonna do after college, it then again hit me and you're like, you hear like more than an athlete constantly, but it doesn't happen until push comes to shove and you're like, all right, now I don't have anything to lean onto, and you have to really figure it out and put all of those eggs that you were collecting and all your things that you learned through the sport into something else.
I mean, I'm just going to bounce off you because, like she said, yes, I am going for another Olympics, but even for me, I think, the more than an athlete situation is you being able to go beyond your sport. Not everybody can think about, I'm going to separate the two, just my sport and my daily life. So knowing that you are saying, after college, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I have nothing in my brain, this, that, and the other. But as an Olympian, it's even worse because you're like, man, did I just go pro? What do I do? But knowing that we have this new thing now with NIL and everything, there is more to us. We can, go into charities. We can give back to our communities. We can do everything that we needed to do. But when I realized where that was at, I was just like, wow, I have more to give within myself and not just me doing everything, my sport. So that, like you saying that just made me think, wait, just because I'm an Olympian or, just because we have NBA players up here and everything like that, it's just we do the things that we do because we love it, not just because we're trying to show everybody we're more than just athletes.
The point in your careers where you have this realization and you start thinking about and building yourself off outside of sport, for an individual sport athlete, it's one thing, right? You do that for yourself and your competition on the field and your performance proves itself. But when you're a team sport athlete, like Jaylen and Patrick, there's this thing of in the locker room, if I start thinking too much about what's next now, my teammates might say, is his head really in the locker room? How do you balance building your identity outside of the sport while you're still playing and sort of the dynamics in the locker room of keeping the main thing the main thing?
You want me to go first?
Oh, yeah, that's all you. Go ahead.
I think the dynamic has changed a lot. You look at the athlete from 10 years ago and the athlete from 20 years ago, especially specifically basketball, which is my sport. It's a lot more common to have athletes and basketball players who are into and accomplishing other things besides what they're in. Like 10 years ago, it was probably less common. 20 years ago, it was probably non-existent. Now everybody's doing something. Part of being VP of the union, as I welcome all the rookies into the league, I encourage them to also start thinking about their post-career plan now rather than opposed to doing it later. I think that as an athlete, you have most of your influence right now, and you should take advantage and maximize. And start to think about that now. It gives you more power, gives you more leverage, because when you're done, a lot of the times, you're done. People tend to not care. People tend to, be less interested. So as you're playing, as you're an athlete, when you have that leverage, when you have that power, to make sure you tap in and engaging into what you can see yourself doing, following your passion and interest, because the reality is you have multiple hours in a day, and you can kind of figure it out. For me, coming into the league, that was kind of my thing. I was actually, what do you call it? It was actually it was frowned upon to have multiple things going on. When I got drafted, it was a GM that came out and said that maybe we wouldn't take him because he has a little bit too many interests outside of basketball, and then actually, in a sense, looked at as a way to damage kind of my draft stock. But in hindsight, now you fast forward 8 years later, and now you're starting to see it's more common that players are coming in and being a CEO, being an activist, being an entrepreneur, being a venture capitalist, being a politician, etc. And I get to welcome them in and kind of guide that, and that's kind of my role as vice president of the union.
Yeah, for sure. Just to piggyback on that, as athletes, as individuals, we're able to multitask. We're able to take upon a lot of things while still focusing on our passion, the things that we love, and giving our 110% effort and maximum focus on that. So like Jaylen said, throughout the years, things have changed, things are different, things are evolving. Recent guys are starting to focus a lot more on the pivot, the transition from something that they've had pretty much their whole life, which is their career, their sports, something that's been familiar to them, to finally realizing that once that is over, what am I supposed to do now? They focus on the pivot so early now that whenever it does happen, they're prepared, which is a beautiful thing, because you don't want it to be surprisingly over at any given point in time and not realizing what to do next. So NBA does a great job, NBPA, what you guys are doing, it's a phenomenal job in helping these young guys, these young men, realize that the ball does stop dribbling at some point, maybe even before you're prepared, maybe before you're ready, but you need to have something that you're equally as passionate about to fall back on and continue life.
Jaylen, I remember when you were coming through the draft, and that was a talking point about you and how much that dynamic and that conversation has changed in those few years that you've been in the league, through the example and also through the leadership with the PA. So commend you for that. And Scotty, we talked a little bit, and this dovetails off of what Jaylen was talking about just a second ago, setting the example, blazing the trail for the athletes that come behind you. And we talked a lot about legacy in the back and on our prep call. How are you thinking about the legacy that you're building in your sport and for the athletes that are coming up from behind you? And Variety and Sportico love breaking news, and so I know Scotty had some exciting news in that front that he can share with us also today.
Yeah, hi everyone. Am I the only Australian in this room? Is there any others? Oh, here we go. Hey. Yeah, thank you, Variety. I mean, this morning we shared some super exciting news, which was that I'd invested in X Games, the business, which is a really exciting venture for me. I've always really enjoyed the investment space, and a few reasons it's exciting is obviously I'm still, first and foremost, still wanting to pursue my athletic career, and there's a lot of stones left unturned yet that I would like to accomplish in the action sports world and in snowboard halfpipe. And yeah, we talked a little bit about legacy, and I think there's a lot of really amazing legacies in action sports. Your Tony Hawks, your Shaun Whites, Chloe Kims, Eileen Goose. I mean, the names go on. But I think there's also a lot of other personalities. There's a lot of other athletes. Australia, it covers. It's a global sport, and there's a lot of stories to share. And I'd really like to work on developing that and telling those stories, and giving more exposure to action sport is something that I'd love to accomplish. And I think it's been really fun to watch the evolution of even just how sport is consumed now, with all the very much, your drive to survives, and you're very much more in the moment, authentic storytelling. And I met with Paul Martin, who I know is coming here later. Actually, I think he's speaking. He's produced Drive to Survive, and we want to do something like that with action sports. So terms of legacy, I think aside from my personal goals on an athletic level, I'd love to have impact on the industry and the next game's the business, and yeah, see where we end up.
It's great. Jordan, I'm going to flip over to you for a second. We talked about this a little bit this morning, obviously the conversation right before us on name, image, and likeness. And I think one of the interesting things as part of this conversation with regards to NIL is that athletes have the ability to explore this side of themselves earlier. And, you know, Jaylen, obviously we just talked for a second ago about, you know, doing some things off the court. Patrick, we're going to get into it in a few about the business that you built when you retired. But NIL now gives athletes across all sports the ability to invest in themselves, build platforms to help amplify what they do on the court, on the field, in their sport, but also for who they are beyond the game and when they retire and don't play anymore. So talk to us about your experience with NIL and how has that helped you develop the more than an athlete side of yourself?
Well, before NIL even came to play, I actually was just going to go straight to college. I didn't think of going pro because as gymnasts, we're not like NBA players, football players, where they can, you know, go to college and then 2 years or 3 years later go into the draft. For us, we had to choose. So having the NIL be something that was pretty like significant, I think gymnastics was the last sport to have that opportunity. So knowing that I have that now, I have the opportunity to do both. I can go with my pro and my college as well, and being able to have sponsorships, whether it's, you know, working with Girl Scouts or something like that, just me being able to explore beyond my elite, you know, USA team era and going with my college and doing everything I can for them. It's been really cool. You know, sponsorships and everything that has been coming in have been amazing. You know, my life is going, it's not great. You know, we still go and go and go, and knowing that I might have an outlet after, you know, my elite career is over, because I still will be like with my college and everything, is pretty cool as well. So with NIL, it's been an amazing and significant thing. I mean, I wish it was sooner for gymnastics, because there's a lot of teammates that I wish, you know, especially Caitlin, like if she would have had that opportunity, that would have been really cool for her. She's a viral sensation over here. Like, you told me I'm an Olympian, you're a viral sensation. So knowing that it was a little late to the game, I just wish, you know, having it earlier would have helped a lot of gymnasts in a lot of ways to be able to have their life how they want it to be. But it's been pretty cool. NIL is something that I would say to any younger generation or anybody who's in the sport right now is really tie into that and really go into your knowledge, because you have a lot of things within yourself rather than you just saying your sport. You have more than that. So just explore.
It also gives another avenue, because kind of like the Olympics or the league, only a select amount make it to actually the top 1%. So to be able to go to college and actually be excited about going to college because you can make money now is actually really awesome. And it helps open a lot of doors for athletes that have to be the ones to put food on the table. And also just being able to sell a book and put your name on it is really exciting and something that I wish was around.
At the collegiate level, up through the pros, and then in retired, obviously all of these things that we're talking about today, really the success of them depends on your ability to have a great team around you. Not the team that you're playing with, but the team that you're executing a lot of these visions and ideas with. So curious just on the NIL piece, but also some thoughts from you all as you've gone through your careers. But do you find the ecosystem of the team is in place to support the college athletes as they're building these brands and their identities off the field? And how have you all leaned on your teams throughout your careers and building all the things that we're talking about? Maybe we'll go to Patrick.
For me personally, being in the NBA, my team around me was, of course, my teammates, coaching staff, agency, extremely helpful with my success and my ability to ultimately last the amount of time that I did in the NBA. So I'm extremely thankful for that. But using them for post-career, solidifying myself within trying to, at least, into the entertainment space now. A good friend of mine, we started our production company almost 3 years ago now. And so within that, we had to formulate the proper team around us, from lawyers to financial help to publicists and agencies, whatever it may be. We had to make sure we had the right team around us that not only believed in us, but could protect us at the same time. And for myself, one of the big things that I want to do is I want to help crossover athletes into the space. Throughout my career, there's always been talks and conversations that I've had with multiple athletes about them wanting to get into the entertainment space, but they just didn't know how to. They didn't know who to reach out to. They didn't know pretty much who could be the person to help guide them down this path. And we started ultimately a fund called the Players Fund, which allows athletes to not only invest and get some type of return later on down the road, but it gets their foot in the door. They have conversations with individuals within the industry, producers, writers, directors, while at the same time they have their name attached to a film. And it lasts for roughly 4 to 5 years, and then at the end of that term, they can make a decision on whether to do another 4 to 5 years, or they can take that information that they've learned, the relationships that they've gained, and hopefully feel confident enough to separate themselves and go down their own path down the road into the entertainment space. So that's just one of the big things that I love that we're doing right now. Another thing that I enjoy, another thing that I'm very passionate about, and just having the right team, the right individuals around me in order to make it be successful it's just a huge key.
I agree. I think having a great team is like the key to life. You know, obviously in sport, you know, having a great team is how you win championships, but I feel like it's the same aspect in normal everyday life in whatever field that you're in. Like, you're only as good as your team. It's so valuable to have a group of individuals who are like-minded, who have the same vision, who can trust each other, hold each other accountable. You know, it's hard enough to get 2 individuals on the same page in a room. Imagine having a full team. I think there's a lot of strength in that. Human capital is what is so valuable, being able to have humans in the same room. I think the richest people in the world are trying to control, like, you know, through social media, through all these different outlets. I think that is what is valuable to most individuals. And I think, like, having a group of people that you can lean on, that you can trust, if you could turn your back, and that you know that nobody will, you know, take advantage of you, mislead you, distrust, whatever. I think having a team is extremely valuable. And I think that's one of the delicacies in life. No matter what field you're in, you can't do it by yourself. So team is extremely important, you know, obviously in sport, and that's what we all here to talk about and do. But I've learned that early in my age to have a team off the court as well that you can trust and that you can lean on. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you have a great team that you can be accountable with, be trustworthy with, that you have the same vision, you're like-minded, all of these things, it don't matter what you're doing. I feel like you'll be able to be successful. It's hard enough, trust me, it's hard enough to get 2 people in the room that can agree to the same thing and see the world the same. So imagine getting 10, 15, 20, 25, you know, that can apply to real estate, that can apply to entrepreneurship, it can apply to really anything. And I feel like that's one of the most valuable things that I learned about team.
A lot of these situations that you are putting yourselves in to build these businesses, it's outside the comfort zone, right? Like the locker room, the practice facility, that's what you're, you know, used to, being around coaches and teammates. Have you noticed yourselves growing as entrepreneurs, as business people, when you're in these situations, when you've got to be in a boardroom and perhaps have an agenda on the table and kind of go through that exercise as you've gone through different phases of your growth off the court, off the field?
I think we learn how to adapt really well in sports and how to be leaders. So I can share, I am starting a company right now, and it's molding 2 things that I really love, which is design and gymnastics. And I've kind of had a hard time coming to this point. Obviously, I've been out of college now 4 or 5 years, but I think everything that I've done up to this moment has led to this. So I'm starting a leotard company, and I'm really excited about it. I found the right people. We've been talking about teams. I found the right people to do it with. And yeah, I think like we know how to do this. Like, we're prepared. We've done sports. We know structure. We know organization. And we have the capability to run whatever we need to.
to go off of that, like everybody's been talking about, is team, team, team. So I recently just bought my first house in Texas, and I think that's, as a 22-year-old, that's like the most biggest thing you can ever do in your life. And when it came to, you know, making sure you have the right real estate agent, you know, the right lawyer, the right, like, everything, it was really, really difficult. I don't think I've ever gone through the most stressful thing in my life besides, like, I can say competing on the most biggest stage was stressful. No. Buying a house is very, very stressful. Like, I was in Hawaii crying. I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? But that's where, you know, that leadership came into play. Like Caitlin was saying, is like, you know, we have been taught this throughout our sport. So being able to, like, tell myself it's okay, this, you have to take it step by step. You have to do everything that you do in your sport, but put it in your daily life. And I think that's where that time management comes into play, that organization, everything. And so realizing everything that I've learned within my sport that I can apply to it within my daily life has helped really, like, tremendously. Like, it's beyond words. But going back to the team situation, it's, my team that I have is very family oriented. It's very unknown to know an athlete who has, you know, a PA as your sister, your HMU as your sister, your social media manager is your mom. Like, everything that I have that's team oriented is family. And knowing that I can trust those people and knowing that I can, you know, put everything in front of them and they're going to give me the right advice back is so much better. Because going back to what Jaylen was saying, having two people in a room agreeing, just think of your family trying to do that. It's very, very crazy. But at the end of the day, I know that I can trust them and I can put everything in front of them and understand, okay, I trust you guys with my life and I trust everything that you guys are doing. So that was my biggest thing.
Ideas to execution, when we're talking about some of these things, right? I want to buy a house. I want to build a business. Scotty, with the deal that you just executed, and Jaylen, I want to get into it a little bit with the fashion side of what you're doing. When you have these ideas, you've got the platform, you've got the creative aspect of it. When it comes to executing, what's that process like for you, Scotty?
It was probably it was the most stressful thing I've ever done in my life, for sure, because, you know, it was one thing to have the vision of wanting to be a part of, you know, being able to invest in the X Games, and MSP Sports Capital, they're the majority stakeholders. They're really great guys, and I think I could really relate before. I think going into these situations, it's one thing to have the idea to do it, but I think as athletes we really learn to adapt, have a lot of discipline. But I think for me, the thing that kept driving me was that I was very curious. So I'm very curious to learn. I don't think I'm going into this with all the answers. I think I can bring a lot of value when it comes to the athletes and how we could potentially improve the events or you know, increase the fan experience, for example. But I think it's also, I'm going in there as and trying to understand and learn how people run business, and I can just really do my best by listening and understanding and you know, putting in my 2 cents where I can. But yeah, it was very stressful. I've actually got my brother here today. I think he's older than me. Everyone's convinced that I'm older, but it's because I got a lot of grey hair. So I'm juggling between doing flips and spins and then trying to invest in the X Games was relatively stressful, but it was really exciting. And I think that's one thing that I noticed the most. I think I got a lot of adrenaline. I enjoy adrenaline. I think I like the curiosity of what it can be, and I think that's very relative to sport. And I really believe in the vision and the future for the X Games and what it can be as a business for fans as well as us athletes. And I do that the same when I go up on the mountain. I'm curious as how far I can go with my snowboarding and the tricks and the evolving in that element. So being in those rooms and I guess doing these deals and things, I get the similar kind of feeling, probably similar to me sitting up here talking to you. I'm a little nervous, honestly. So yeah, it's great. It's fun and I enjoy it.
Jaylen, I'm curious, we talk a little bit about the fashion side of what you've been doing, how you've got the ideas, you've got the creativity. How's the execution been for you?
The execution has been a journey. So I started a brand probably about my second year in the league. A lot of times athletes are looked at as products, and those products are funneled towards these certain brands, right? That's kind of like how it works. You know, you sign with a certain brand, and they pick and choose whether they're going to market you or not, or make you a star or not. You know, for me, I didn't feel like waiting around for anybody, so I started my own brand, and it just started in Boston first. Like, they weren't selling my jersey for whatever particular reason, and I just started, you know, growing my brand each and every day. Anybody would buy like a hoodie or something like that, I would give a little bit extra attention to, take a picture with at the games, and just from that little bit of energy over the years, it turned into almost like a cult following, where all of the people who are wearing my brand is just like supporters of what I do, like off the floor. They also come to like my Harvard speeches, MIT, or anything that I'm doing off the court as well. But, you know, the journey, because I've done a lot of stuff on my own. I haven't had anybody necessarily hold my hand through this whole process. A lot of times, athletes have so many different things that are in front of them, right? They tell you just focus on sport and let everybody else take care of everything. And I think that, if anything, that's a part of what I want to change as an athlete over the next 10 years, right? Because athletes have so much more capabilities to be so much more than just the product that you see on the floor, or the product that you see, you know, out in front of the television. And I think the world is just now realizing that athletes are actual human beings at the same time. And in some places, you know, they still haven't realized it yet. So for me, the journey of starting a brand, the journey of just having something that you own, I think was extremely valuable, even if it doesn't go anywhere, just setting the tone and example for the next generation, to be able to be like, you know, we understand our value, we understand what we add to the world, to culture, and to be able to have ownership and start something that's yours and have it to be able to be successful is extremely nuanced and hard to do. But I think over the next couple of years, you'll start to see more people trend in that direction, rather than continuing to give your influence, continue to give your clout, continue to give your leverage to other people because they don't think you're smart enough to figure it out.
What's been the most challenging part of building a business for you?
The most challenging part is probably the time management. I would say, you know, trying to manage your interests off the floor versus, you know, your demands and your requirements and obligations on the floor. Because at the end of the day, you know, my day job is my day job, and that's what, you know, I got to continue to progress, continue to work at, because it's only 60 athletes that come in every year, and it's like this. I think they announced there's like 8 billion people on the planet. It's only been 10,000 that ever play in the NBA, or less than 10,000, or something like that. So the percentage is very, very low, and like, you know, you slack for a second, there's somebody coming behind you. So, you know, people don't realize how hard it is to maintain that position, you know, how hard it is to continue to elevate in that position, because everybody's trying to do the same thing. But I think the hardest thing to do is definitely, I think, time manage, you know, for sure, between meetings, between what you want to do, your personal life, between, you know, what you have to do with your team. I think that's probably the hardest, to kind of balance everything.
One of the most interesting things I learned during the prep for this was that you were a chess player as a kid.
I was.
Yeah. And we've had some conversations leading up to this about how each of these individuals, what the things that they did as children, you know, playing chess, doing, Patrick, we were talking backstage, things other than just playing basketball. If you think back to your development as a youth, and there's a lot of talk about sort of the Tiger Woods strategy or the Roger Federer strategy, where he played, his parents had him doing a whole bunch of different things. If you think back to sort of who you were as a kid and all the different things that you did to create a broader identity, do you find a direct correlation between the success that you're all having off, you know, outside of the sport? Are there things that you can link back to?
I would say so. Growing up as a kid, just personally from my experience, of course, playing multiple sports, but definitely as a kid having the old school camcorder with VHS tape and making home movies. Doing that at a young age and then showcasing those movies for my parents, for my friends. Always having a passion for the entertainment, always having a passion for creating, definitely helped shape me to where I am now. So playing multiple sports, again, for myself personally, playing multiple sports, being in different programs, after-school programs, hanging out with, certain people, and as well as developing a passion outside of sports at a young age helped me become who I am today. I would say so, yeah.
What do you guys feel about the obligation to give back, to have an impact, to use your platform? I know a lot of you are involved with different charities. You either start nonprofits or you lend your time or your image and your likeness to different nonprofits. But how do you balance that, the ability to sort of, or the desire to give back with what you're doing and all of your business interests? Anybody?
I guess I'll take this one. That's for me. It's personally just who I am. I feel like I was blessed with ability to play the sport because God wanted me to do something with my platform. I learned to walk by like chasing after a basketball. I feel like before I knew right or wrong, it was already like instilled in me like this would be my platform. And for me, I still have this innate fear that if I don't, use my platform to give back, be a voice for the voiceless, and to some extent, I feel like it'll be taken away from me. So it's an obligation for me to use my platform. It's just kind of how I was raised. I come from an educational, background. My family, my moms, my aunts, my cousins, all teachers, all leaders, all activists. So I kind of come from that type of environment. So for me, it's just like breathing. It just comes. It's synergy in between like using your platform and being an athlete. I think it shouldn't be a choice. I think it should be obligatory because a lot of people have influence, and influence in sports is like the number one thing, especially in America and in the world really. Sports, music, entertainment are some of the most influential platforms there is on the planet. So just imagine if more athletes, more entertainers were more socially conscious, were more invested in giving back to their community, and I think the world would be a little bit of a different place, and that's kind of the walk, and that's kind of the things I talk about. But for me, it's just it shouldn't be a choice. It's an obligation.
Are there trends in your sports that you're paying attention to as you're developing stuff outside the sport that perhaps you have a different lens on because you are an athlete in that space that you think, I'm watching that and I want to try to figure out a way to create a business around that? Patrick, we were talking about storytelling in the sports space, but are there things that you guys see in the next 12 to 24 months that are coming that perhaps the folks in the room aren't paying attention to, but you have a lens on because of where you sit?
I think for gymnastics, it's more about the diversity. There's been a lot of talk about, a certain look in our sport and everything like that. So knowing that being in it, it's really hard as African American being, looked at a certain way, or you have to be judged a certain way, and knowing that you are trying to fix it within your sport, it's a little difficult because you're still like trying to do everything you can to make sure you're still with Team USA, and you got to be very cautious when it comes to those certain things. But for me, there's been a lot of talk about hair, so being able to find a way to let the younger generation, or even my generation now, like, it's okay to embrace your hair, it's okay to embrace your beauty, really, because that's a huge thing that kind of is shown when it comes to our sport, because, like I was saying, you have to look a certain way. And so being a part of that and making sure everybody is, doing what they want to do and how they want to do it, I've kind of, put myself out there. I will wear my hair how I want to wear it. I will, I'm really one of the only gymnasts that actually has nails doing their sport. It's very, like, unique to even see that. So I just always, like, let everybody know, you do what you want to do. Your beauty is your beauty, and honestly, it's like it's crazy to see the change because it is changing.
Scotty?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's nowadays social media can be a bit of a front of maybe using, well, as we were mentioning, platforms. I mean, every athlete, a lot of influential person has a platform to speak on now. I think it's important to, if you have passions and there's a message, key messaging you want to get out there, it's important to do it if it's meaningful and it's going to have impact in the right way. Yeah, and nowadays, I mean, I watch, and the people I love most is generally athletes or peers that I admire, is that I understand what they do. I understand they're great at what they do and they're the best at what they do, but I like to understand and just, we always use this theory that let's just give people access to your camera roll, because that's, nowadays it's all about, you can have all these great feats in your career, but it's also about being authentic. And I think people also are very switched on nowadays about what's authentic and what isn't. So for me, it's very much about, you know, there's the accolades in the snowboarding, and there's amazing business ventures that are happening. But I think for us, and using my platform, it's about being authentic me and telling that story. And I'm sure these guys can relate as well, that it's pretty important.
Patrick, what's next for the company side?
What I find interesting right now is overall the pivot for us athletes. So the moment of realization where your career is over, how you handle that as a person, and what do you do next. So finding athletes, having conversations, sitting down, talking about that moment of realization, whether it was planned or unplanned, how you handled it mentally and physically with yourself and your family and your friends, and what are you doing now. So a bunch of athletes in the world, old and new, guys, females who used to be in the limelight, who used to have it all, and then once they're out of their profession, they're never thought of again. So bringing people like that back to life and just having conversations with them and talking to them about their transition and whether it's successful or unsuccessful, what they're doing now and how are they handling life.
We've got just a couple seconds left. I don't know if there's any athletes that you all have looked to as you've been building yourselves off the court, off the field, that you sort of think about as an example of somebody that you want to try to emulate. But just as we wrap up here, we've got a buzzer beater section.
I would say Michael Jordan. I'm named after him, so it's very true. I would tell the story, but we have 0 seconds. But just the dynamic and the understanding of his story and how, you know, from the flu game all the way to, you know, his documentary, The Last Dance, and everything that he has just put out into the world, and how he gave back to his community, whether it was within, you know, kids, whether it was in basketball, whether it was, you know, in anything that he did, and just like the inspiration that he put on me, I've just kind of took that and was like, how can I, you know, incorporate this within myself? As obviously I'm 5 foot, I'm not a 6'7" basketball player, so I got to figure that out within my sport. But it's really cool just to see that no matter who he is, no matter if he is the GOAT of basketball, no matter if he's, you know, somebody who went from a whole different sport back to basketball, he still was able to be Michael Jordan. And I think that's the one thing that I have realized within myself. No matter what I do, whether I'm on the mat, off the mat, in a grocery store, I'm still always going to be the person I am.
That's a great way to end. Thank you guys all so much. Awesome conversation.